Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I wanted to talk for a second about something that I just saw that someone had brought to my attention. Every day, people bring stuff to my attention, and I appreciate it when you do. Feel free to go to my website, boycewatkins.com, and you can message me from there and send me, anything that you think I might be interested in that you'd like my opinion on. And if it works, I'll be glad to talk about it. Also, I do a lot of like speaking and stuff like that, and so people always ask, well, how do you get in touch? How do we get in touch with you if we want to bring you to our campus or our church or whatever? You can do that at my website, boycewatkins.com. So that's my little plug on the website. But putting all that aside, let's talk about um, the rapper Common. Now, the rapper Common is he's a Chicago native. I'm not a native of Chicago. I live here though, and I love this city, and I also love Common. I respect Common so much. I've never met him, but I know a lot of people who know him and that kind of thing. And I don't know what he knows about me, but I just want to make it clear that I respect him. So this is not a common. This is not a session to bash Common, but sometimes we need our friends to help us out a little bit. Um, and in this case, I want to help Common out a little bit based on some comments I saw when he appeared on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Common's career is doing, it's kind of taking off. He's getting some opportunities. He's getting a chance to be more accepted into Hollywood. With that comes a lot of very interesting restrictions in the sense that you're allowed to bash black people all you want, but you can't bash whites and you can't bash Jews. That's just kind of the rule of Hollywood. So you'll have, for example, in the show Empire, they're debating as to whether or not Terrence and Taraji are going to use the N word, but if and they're going to let them do whatever they choose to do. But there would be no debate about whether or not they could use a word that was derogatory toward Jews because they would not allow that. The answer would just be no. And so so my point there is that in that Hollywood space, in that big money space, in that entertainment space, there are certain rules that black people must live by. There are certain kinds of black people who are more likely to be accepted. Certain ideas that are okay, certain ideas that are not okay. Those ideas tend to be leaned against African Americans, which means that for African Americans, either you go to Hollywood and you are successful because you have very little connection to your culture, like a Lee Daniels. Lee Daniels made it clear. He said, "Look, I don't care if you call me a sellout, as long as my movies are in theaters." Lee's going to be very successful. He'll be allowed to make a lot of movies, even if they're bad. They'll keep letting him make movies because he's their boy. He will play ball in the way that they want him to play ball. Now with some other guys, I think like Chris Rock, for example, there's a lot of frustration because I think Chris does care about his blackness. Chris Rock does want to be a black man, and there's a price to pay for that. Same thing with Spike Lee, people like that. Now, with that being said, let's go to Common. All right. Common made a comment on the Daily Show, which a lot of people were upset about. They felt that it was incredibly problematic. Of course, the white people clap. That's what always happens. A black person says something that where black people will start groaning, and white people are like, "Oh, this is so good." That's just kind of what happens, right? They love it when we let racism off the hook, when we let oppression off the hook. And I don't think that's what Common was trying to do. I really don't. I don't believe that Common thinks racism is dead. But he did say, he did sort of give this tiny speech that sounded almost a little bit hokey, almost like he was saying what he knew that they wanted to hear, where he basically said, let's forget about the past. I'm extending my hand in love, and I just want you to help me out because I'm going to help myself, but I want you to help me out too. Um, and it almost sounded like this very simple solution to racism: just add water, and racism will go away, right? And the problem with this is that to me it reflects a potential lack of understanding by all parties to the depths at which racism go in America. Most of us don't really understand racism in America because most of us don't know history. In the public schools, don't teach you history. They don't teach you accurate history. They certainly don't teach you very accurate black history. primarily because they want you to forget about the past. If you look at Black history, the way it's taught in public schools, it's pretty simple. It is, you were slaves. There was nothing before slavery. So you didn't exist the other 10,000 years you were in Africa, or 100,000 years, or the 3 million years you were in Africa. Actually, I want to say it's over a million. It's a long time. I got to look it up. That didn't matter. That doesn't exist. All that matters is what happens when you became slaves. Eventually, Abraham Lincoln freed you, and then Martin Luther King gave you civil rights, and then you got a black president. The end. That's what black history tends to consist of. So a lot of us just don't understand. We just don't know, how America came to be. And the reason that this is so debilitating is because you can't understand anything without understanding where it came from. You can't understand the present without understanding the past. You can't understand how America operates without understanding how America came to be. Every culture, or excuse me, every tradition, every structure, every institution, every practice, every norm, every belief, all of that came from somewhere. All of it came from somewhere. Like, for example, I watched a recent Ken Burns documentary about the Civil War. Ken Burns does these great documentaries about the history of mostly white people, but it's very interesting stuff. So if you really want to understand how white folks think, I encourage you to watch some of these Ken Burns documentaries. And he was talking about how, about the lady who wrote that song, "Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory of the Coming of the Lord." And he talks about when that song became popular. And then since then, everybody just sings it. Everybody knows it, and they just know it's there, but they don't know where it came from. So everything started somewhere. Everything was built in some way. And so, when you look at Common's remark and his statement that, let's forget about the past. I have to say right off the bat, we can't forget about the past, because you cannot. If you by forgetting about the past, you are neglecting your ability to have a healthy future. You cannot move forward to the future while neglecting the past in terms of how we got here. And also, we have to get past this idea that racism is this simple thing where it's all about me calling you the N word, or somebody mistreating you because you're black. Those things do happen, and those things do matter, right? Because especially when you talk about police, police killing young black men because they think that they're thugs, which ultimately a lot of that comes from media. That's why you see me have concerns about shows like an Empire, or some of this reality TV stuff, or some of this craziness going on in hip hop music on the radio. I'm not talking about real hip hop. I'm talking about that stuff on the radio. That concerns me, because the question is, where did that police officer even get the idea that black men are thugs? Where do white people, many of whom never met a black person, or really don't even know any black people, where do they get the idea that black people are thugs? Why is it so easy to convince an all-white jury that black men are scary? It comes from media. They get it from media. So we have to be thoughtful about the images that are presented of us in media. So that's one institution among many that have been created over time, throughout history, to create the most debilitating form of racism, which is structural racism. Structural racism is the real enemy in America. See, because the thing is, structural racism can exist even if there's not a racist person in the room. All you have to do is have a bunch of white folks in the room. Let's say all the white people are, that they treat everyone equally. They don't have any preconceived notions about blacks. Let's say that none of them are racist. You have a bunch of white people in a room, a bunch of black people in a room, where there's already a power structure in place created by racists from the past that dictates that creates a scenario such that the white folks are going to have all the power, that their value systems are going to be imposed upon the African Americans. A lot of this starts with wealth. White families have about 100 times more wealth than black families, and a lot of it is because white people stole a ton of money from black people. They stole almost everything we had. They ran us off our farms in the South and kept the property. They burned down Black Wall Street. They kept black people from getting good jobs. They kept us from building companies. They kept us from having economic opportunities. They kept us from getting support from the federal government. They took all that from us and they gave it to their kids. So their kids don't have to be racist to continue racism. They don't have to even they don't have to go through the trouble of calling us niggas and mistreating us and beating us and lynching us and castrating us. Their ancestors did all that for them. They have created the scenario. They made the birthday cake and the kids get to eat it. So for somebody to just say let's forget about the past, you're throwing out 99.9% of the mother you're throwing out 99.9% of the equation. And no one's ever heard me say motherfucker on this thing before. And I am so sorry. I am so sorry for doing that. I don't even know what came over me. Now you got a glimpse of the real voice. When I get mad, sometimes I might use the word motherfucker. I try not to use it in public. And sometimes I might become a motherfucker. So excuse my French. I won't do that again. I am so sorry. But I hope that this communicates the depth to which this concerns me. That anybody, and again, with complete love and respect to Common. I mean, I like this guy. I really do. But you cannot, don't ever use the words, let's forget about the past. Do not say that. You can't say that, man. You cannot say let's just forget about the past, because the past is where all the equations are solved. That's where the answers lie. The answers lie in the past. So instead of forgetting about the past, we have to go in the opposite direction and say, let's dig and reinvestigate the past. Let's get in touch with our history. Let's understand white folks' history. To understand the history of black people in America, you have to also understand the history of white people in America. And then if you really want to understand the history of white people in America, go study the history of white people in Europe. Same thing. Go study the history of black people in Africa, so we can put those pieces together and understand how we hit this collision course, how we created the world in which we live today. Again, it's like if you're trying to understand a building, like why is this building shaped this way? Who chose this design? Why are the walls painted a certain color? Why are there 4 levels to the building instead of 2? Why is it made? Why is this section made out of wood? This section made out of brick? You have to go back to the blueprint. You have to say who designed this. Why did they design it this way? What were the norms that existed when this design was put into place? What were the steps taken to build every section of this building? And then by understanding the past, you understand the present of the structure that is in front of you. So if you want to understand America, understand America is a country that is built on structural racism that has been put in place over several hundred years. So to understand the structure in front of us, we must dig back to the blueprint and understand how this was all built. And that means that we would then understand why universities are racist, why 99% of universities don't have very many black professors, which is something that should offend you, by the way. If you went to college and didn't have any black teachers outside of African American studies, that's racist. That's something that you should be screaming about. If you're a college student, go to your administrators right now and tell them that you demand to have some black professors, because that is what you deserve. You've been trained to believe that a white man is always supposed to be in front of you in the classroom, but that's just not true. If you want to understand why media is racist and why it's owned by majority whites, if you want to, then you have to look at history. If you want to understand why whites have all the wealth, you have to look at history. If you want to understand corporate America and why whites possess all the power in corporate America, you have to look at history. All this goes back to history. So for Common to say, let's forget about the past, not only are you going to get all the wrong answers, because think about it, if you just look at America and you only look at what you see in front of you, you're going to think black people are the most pathetically lazy, ignorant group of people that you've ever seen in your life. You're going to say, wait a minute, these people, they dominate the ghettos, they fill up the prisons, they don't have any money, they don't have much education compared to whites. So it's clear white people work harder, white people are smarter, white people have better values, white people make better decisions, white people have better families. But if you know history, then you understand why these disparities exist. The last point I'll make on this, and then I'm done. And once again, I want to keep reiterating, this is not a session to bash Common, because in case Common sees this or something, I don't want him to think I don't like him. I support him 100%. When I meet him, I will shake his hand and I will be his friend, because I think that he's a good guy. I really do. I say a lot about hip hop artists that annoy me, and I have no I hold nothing back when I talk about that. But Common's one of those guys that I respect, because he tries very hard to have a degree of conscience conscientiousness in the way he presents his music. But the last thing I'll say about the reason why we can't let any celebrity, Common, or anybody else say, let's forget about the past, is because you have to understand when we forget about the past, that is one of the most disrespectful things in the world that we could ever do to our ancestors. Yeah, now this ain't your mama or your grandmother. This is your grandmother's grandmother. Imagine, think about what they went through. They were beaten, raped, castrated, hung from trees, tortured in unimaginable ways, forced to wear chains around their necks, had their families ripped apart, had to have sex with the master even if they didn't want to, and were pretty much put through every form of torturous emasculation humanly imaginable. And for us to say that we're just going to act like it didn't happen is absolutely unacceptable. Unacceptable. I mean, imagine if somebody raped and murdered your grandmother and chopped her body up and buried her body in the backyard. All right, would you be stupid enough to say, "Oh, let's just forget about the past. Let's pretend like that didn't happen"? And you're talking to somebody who's related to the person who raped and murdered your grandmother and took all her property and is still living in that house. That's the country we live in. That's the reality of America. Now, if people want to consider what I just said to be anti-white or radical, or that I'm a dangerous black person for saying this, then I say that that's your issue, not mine. That's your mental illness, not mine. Because the fact that you somehow think that I'm a bad person for telling you the truth means that something is wrong with you. And what I encourage black people to do is to not be afraid to tell that truth. Understand there's going to be consequences to tell the truth. I mean, you might get fired, so you can believe I got fired, right? But at the end of the day, I think that when you stand by what you believe in, and you're strong and you're firm in your convictions, and you're very consistent, and you're willing to work hard to overcome the things that you lose by being a strong black person, I think at the end of the day, you're going to be okay. I think when you're on your deathbed and you're looking back at your life, almost never going to regret the fact that you chose not to sell out. When you look back and you realize you lived a life of integrity, and maybe you lost a couple dollars because of it, a couple of opportunities because of it, I would argue that 99% of the time, you will be glad that you took a stand, that you lived the life you were meant to live. And I know certainly other people are going to be glad you did it, because every time we stand up, every time we speak up, even if it's to our detriment, somebody does benefit. The target does get a little softer. I was talking to somebody today about John Brown, the white guy who tried to lead the slave revolt. A lot of people know the story of John Brown. If you don't know it, please go look it up. Well, we were talking about how John Brown basically got his sons and a couple of African Americans and a few other people to stand with him in a revolt, and they expected that the slaves were all going to join up and form this massive army with them and fight against the slave masters. Well, unfortunately, the slaves were too afraid. They didn't join John Brown, which I think is just very sad and tragic. And John was killed. And some people say John Brown died for nothing, but to this day, there are statues of John Brown all around the country. John Brown is considered by millions of people to be a hero. John Brown is highly respected for his sacrifice. John Brown raised the national consciousness, which helped to lead to the Civil War. It wasn't the only thing that led to the Civil War, but it was part of what pushed the Civil War along, because the enemy became more frightened after this, and those who stood with John Brown became a little bolder. So even if you have to be the John Brown in your workplace, you're the one who takes the stand, you're the one who goes down bloody and burning, never ever think that energy you put into the universe is not going to help somebody else and is not going to push forward your cause. Just because it doesn't benefit you doesn't mean it did not benefit somebody. So thinking what helped give me courage and motivation when I was going through it, and believe me, when I was at Syracuse University, man, they just threw everything at me. These stupid idiots were just about the most horrible bigots you can imagine. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And it bothered me, because I said, wait, I'm a good person. I'm a hardworking person. I'm a qualified scholar. Why am I being treated like this? Well, welcome to America. That's just the way things are. But, so I understand that feeling. But I'm telling you, when you make that sacrifice, somebody does benefit. And what kept me going was when I learned the ability to think outside of myself, to think about things bigger than me, that it ain't always about you, boys. Maybe you're not the one who's going to benefit, but somebody else will. So I started thinking outside of myself, and I also started thinking outside of my time. I started thinking not just about where I am right now in 2006, 2007, 2008, when I was really going through it. I thought about 2018, 2028, 2038, 2098. What's going to happen years down the line to my children and grandchildren in terms of what their opportunities are going to be based on my sacrifice. When I started thinking about that, when I expanded my time and my space, I was better able to understand that that it didn't start and end with me. I was not the alpha and the omega. I was actually a piece to a bigger puzzle, in terms of solving a longer term problem and achieving a longer term objective. So I didn't mean to be long winded with that last explanation. I apologize. I know I was talking about Common, but I wanted to just share this with anybody who's going through that battle in their life. And most of us are. Most of us, when you're getting up, going to work, maybe dealing with people who aren't treating you right in the workplace. And that's why I always tell people, learn how to start your own business. Because I'm telling you, when I learned how to start my own business, I became freer than you can ever imagine. Even when I wasn't making no money, I woke up with a smile on my face because I knew that what I didn't have massa over my shoulder telling me what to do. I knew that I could feel like a man every day. See, black men have our manhood stripped. We get stripped to the point where we feel like damn little boys our whole life because we're being emasculated constantly. We're being told to bow our heads and duck and crawl and beg and plead and run away and be scared of white folks. Think about this. Think about how afraid black people are of white people. Think about how many times you've seen us afraid to tell the truth because we're worried about what white people think. It's not natural to spend that much of your life in fear of other people. So then what you have to ask yourself is, why am I so afraid? What is it that they have on me that is making me feel enslaved in this way? You have guys like Jay-Z and stuff with half $1 billion in the bank who are still afraid to take a controversial position on certain issues. And that's weird to me because I'm thinking, you got $500 million in the bank. They can't really, I mean, what can they really do to you? They certainly can't kill you financially. What are you afraid of, right? So I find that kind of confronting that fear and getting rid of the obstacles that people, or the things that people are using to control you. If you're feeling like Pinocchio, then chop the strings and learn how to walk like, be a real boy. Learn how to walk with your own legs and your own arms. And I use the real boy analogy because that was the story of Pinocchio. He wanted to be a real boy. So anyway, just so you know that. So anyway, the last thing I'll say about this is that, in terms of Common, you know, we can't forget about the past. The past matters. The past matters to understand the present and to understand the future. Again, I'm not criticizing him, but I am correcting him on this, and I want to know what you think. So please let me know what you think. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins. Feel free to come by and visit my website as well. It's boycewatkins.com and also at yourblackworld.net. That's where me and a whole team of people, we give news and all that stuff every day. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. I am gone. Peace.